Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 9 Angels and Demons. Orne Library. Arthur Parker was practically dead when Naruto came back to his senses and saw him lying on the mottled gray carpet of his office. The shinobi wasted no time. Rippled patterns emerged from the now light purple sclera and iris of his eyes. A golden shroud of warm and bright chakra then engulfed his body. Using his six-path sage power combined with the immense raw energies of the Jubi, he endeavored to pull the head librarian's essence from the netherworld and was successful. Once the scholar was revived, Naruto then cast a genjutsu to erase the horrors which the former have been subjected to. "Are you all right, Arthur?" Naruto inquired as he saw his friend's eyes slowly open. "Yes. What happened? I can't help but feel this indescribable fear, like waking up from a nightmare I couldn't remember," Dr. Parker said in a weary voice, still dazed. Though Naruto erased his memories, the fear still lingered like embers from a great conflagration. "What happened to your eyes?" he then queried curiously as he saw the blonde's Rinnegan. "I'll explain later. The important thing is that you're fine now," Naruto said as he turned his attention to his mentor's journal. He then formed a seal of confrontation and cast a powerful genjutsu through his Rinnegan, followed by an even more potent fuinjutsu that he hoped to seal the horrific lore contained within it. The writings on the said journal waned and dwindled until it was once again a collection of blank pages bound by a leather cover. As both men were about to let out a sigh of relief, an ominous prodigy occurred. The fuinjutsu Naruto cast upon the journal can't seem to fully complete its sequence, as if the arcane balefulness of its contents is fighting back, preventing it from being enclosed by the sealing formula. The fuinjutsu then inexorably shattered and the journal's leaves began to turn rapidly like a deck of cards being shuffled. Then from its dexter hinge a strange rune formed and black liquescent matter began to gush in a sudden torrent, swiftening and deepening as it poured incessantly. Naruto and Dr. Parker was horrified, with the latter opted to pull a revolver hidden on his desk as the black tarry liquid began to morph into a horrific blob that transformed into one of the strange alien creature they saw earlier from the phantasmagoric vision. It looked parallel to an immense fish-like amphibian, resembling a bizarre eel with long, tubular and segmented body, as well as a tail at one end and two fins near the head and another along the back. A little bit back from the head are four long tentacles, two sprout from across each other on the top, and two more of the same on the underbelly. The creature is called Bakunawa, one of the numerous semi-sentient entities that drift along the infinite dimensional layers of outer God's realm, feeding on the ambient psychic energies of the immaterial plane. It would seem that creature locked on the vast psychic presence of the Jubi within Naruto, which was like a potent shining beacon drawing it. It then crossed the barriers into the mundane reality humans occupy through the journal, using it as a portal. Being a multi-dimensional entity by nature, it continuously phased itself in and out between dimensions as it flew around the library, passing through solid objects like a specter. From a mortal's point of view, it appeared to be moving in a spasmodic manner, fluttering in brief irregular bursts of movements. Abruptly, the Bakunawa flew upwards, coursing through the walls and roof the building unhindered. It then convulsed and coiled itself into a tight ball, releasing a blinding light and deafening sound that briefly benumbed Naruto's senses and caused Dr. Parker to lose consciousness from the all-out sensory assault. Due to the immense psychic energies released by billions of human minds, the creature evolved into a vast dragon-like entity with a pair of sweeping wings on its serpentine body, one of which was massive enough to encompass the entire building as they spread, while the smaller pair was located just aback its larger counterpart. "Damn it!" Naruto cursed. The expression on his face was grim and severe, glaring darkly on the creature. He then formed a mini-tailed beast ball and was about to launch it on the Bakunawa when the creature suddenly evaporated into a vapor-like form. It then latched itself into the shinobi, manifesting as a dragon-like mark akin to that of a tattoo that spiraled on his left forearm. What just happened?" Naruto pondered with a comical expression on his face. "It would seem that it likes you, kid," Kurama grinned then answered him in a gruff voice. "So it decided to become an accessory?" Naruto queried. He's fully aware of what's happening but for some reason wanted to tease the fox. "You can use it as a personal summon, you dope," Kurama replied, starting to get annoyed. "Cool." Naruto acted overly delighted, like a child who just set foot inside of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. In reply, Kurama scoffed with a loud, "PFF'd." Is that jealousy I sniff? Naruto once again arched with a cheeky grin on his face. Screw you, you blonde idiot. Kurama sneered as he realized the shinobi's trolling. Naruto burst into a loud belly laugh, slapping his thighs from the amusement of seeing the fox's exasperated expression. Naruto, is everything alright? What happened to that thing? Dr. Parker, who just regained his consciousness, inquired with a quivering voice. Don't worry about it, Arthur, everything is alright now. Though you might want to lock your grandfather's journal somewhere more secure. Naruto replied in a gentle voice, flashing an easy smile that conveyed his reassurance. Forks. The next day, as Bella woke up, she was greeted by a beam of light emanating from the window of her room. Immediately rising from her bed, she then gazed into the transparent glass and saw that the skies were clear and it was strangely sunny. It made her feel blissful as she felt the golden warm rays gently touched her skin, but the weather has also ushered some gloom and dejection as she realized that she won't be seeing Edward today due to the same ironic circumstance. At school, Mike ceaselessly and obsessively followed Bella all day up until government class like a golden retriever. Constantly trying to make amends for upsetting her the other day and at the same time duplicitously lulling her away from Edward and into his arms. Eventually, it became too tiresome that she just decided to just be magnanimous. Great. Now for the other one. Bella thought while letting out a sigh of exasperation as she walked the corridors to biology. She was pertaining to Alex, who will surely be as persistent as Mike is. Frankly, she already had her day's quota of importunate people, and her vexation is only exacerbated by the fact of Edward's absence. As Bella entered the classroom, she indeed saw the young man who didn't seem to notice her, for he was reading a curious-looking tome. He was wearing a light Henley tee that fit him snugly, emphasizing his muscular chest and overall well-built body. This, coupled with the young man's imperious good looks, has distracted Bella, and being naturally clumsy, tripped and crashed over Alex, who was equally flabbergasted by it all. Are you all right, Bella? Alex asked awkwardly in a rather sheepish and shy voice. Yeah, Bella replied in the same tone, blushing. You know, Alex, she'll probably be far better if you actually get off of her. Mike sneered. That made the two realize the awkward position they're in. Their faces were dangerously close to each other and everyone in the room was staring at them. I mean, come on. This is so unfair. It's a good thing he's so naive, Mike then thought. Why does she get all of the boys' attention around here? Jessica contemptuously and jealously thought. Oh yeah, sorry, Alex diffidently muttered, blushing red as tomato. He would have helped Bella get up, but Mike moved as fast as lightning and beat him to it. Thanks, Bella smiled vaguely as Mike helped her up, deeply uncomfortable from all the unwanted attention, as if each individual stare was like a tiny needle piercing through her skin. What the hell, dude? Mike hissed to Alex in a barely audible voice. I didn't actually plan for that to happen, you know. The young man replied to his friend in the same manner. But you enjoyed it, don't you? Mike said in a doubtful tone and with an incredulous glare. Guilty as charged, Alex just gave him a small nod and a sheepish smile. The room was filled with tumult and rustling murmurs of students talking and chatting to each other, since it was still a bit early for class, and there's a note from Mr. Molina that he'll be late today due to an urgent school business, no doubt. Bella, Alex said in a sheepish voice. Yeah, Bella replied, turning her face to the young man. Well, sorry for the way I acted the other day, Alex mumbled in an even more timid tone. It's okay, forget it, Bella said with a gentle smile. Thanks, Alex replied with a much more assuaged expression on his face. So, are we good? He then said with a boyish smile and a double thumbs up that Bella finds genuinely cute. Yeah, we're good, she then chuckled, amused by her seatmate. Let me make it up to you at least, Alex said with a flattering smile. That wouldn't be necessary, Alex, Bella sighed, sensing a Mike Newton 2.0 scene all over again. Come on, tell me your wish, Alex said enthusiastically and with an ebullient smile playing at the edges of his lip. Caught by the statement, Bella was taciturn for a long second. Okay, I wish it rains, she then made her request in a tired voice. She thought it's impossible for the young man to fulfill her demand, and also because a part of her deeply yearns for Edward, who wasn't able to show himself due to the effulgent rays of the sun. So let me get this straight. You're in a town that rains almost year-round, and in the rare chance that the sun shows up you want it gone. Alex amusedly queried. Basically, Bella flirtingly muttered. What am I doing? I can't believe I'm flirting with him, she then an uncomfortable thought. I must say, you never really struck me as an ombrophile, Alex said chuckling. A what? Bella queried with a furrowed brow, thinking that the last word was something inappropriate. A person who loves rain, Alex replied in kind and alluring voice. Look, he then gently pointed Bella to the window behind her. Bella then saw the blue being gracefully blanketed by the imminent billows of cumulonimbus that were spreading uniformly throughout the sky. Its looming shade gradually caused the immediate vicinity to moderately darken. Then droplets of rain began to trickle, falling gently on the plants and flowers, magnifying their natural hues, intensifying their colors to deepen and become more vivid. How did you, flummoxed, Bella asked out of wonderment. I would love to claim the credit, but the truth is it's just a coincidence, Bella, Alex explicated in a gentle voice and with a jovial smile on his face. At the back of his head, however, he was frantic and quite distraught. Oh crap, what have I just done? Why on earth did I agree to this? Now, Emo Dward is gonna show up any time soon to ruin everything. He then thought. As if on cue, Edward walked into the threshold of the classroom door. In actuality, he was always nearby, indiscernibly concealed and watching over Bella as he was quite protective of her. He greeted Bella with a soft smile but was rather dour and cold on Alex, which he eyed quite darkly. Bella's face then livens as she saw Edward, conveying a love that is both perdurable and supernal. Hey, can I ask a favor? Do you mind if Edward and I sit together? Just for today. Bella then turned to her seatmate and asked in a persuading voice coupled with puppy dog eyes that bent the young man to involuntarily comply. Yeah, sure, no problem, he responded somewhat reluctantly and with sad smile. Silently grabbing his backpack, along with the strange book he's reading earlier, then glumly moved to a seat just a few rows behind the couple. Obviously hurt but didn't let anyone notice it. La push. First beach. Base from your stories, Sam sounds a really stuck-up guy, what do you see in him anyway? Emily said in a ponderous voice, handing Leah a sandwich. I don't know, I just love him, Leah answered, unsure. When she and Sam became a couple some time ago, she was definitely certain that she has found a soulmate in him. She loves him like no other, but apparently something has changed, and she couldn't explain nor fathom what it is. How about him? Emily whispered, pertaining to Naruto. I don't know, Leah said in a confounded tone, laying her palms on her face then running it up to her forehead. Suddenly Sam arrived, along with Paul and Jared. The latter two just phased into their wolf forms a couple of weeks ago, and the former was acting as their alpha and leader. As soon as Sam saw Emily, a profound and intimate spark ignited deep within his core and filled him with glowing warmth that coursed throughout his body. He then felt unconditionally drawn and ultimately tethered to the young woman as if their spirits were linked by an inseverable celestial bond. Sam, is everything all right? Leah asked, confounded and a bit suspicious of her boyfriend who was staring soulfully at her cousin. Yeah, Sam responded. With great difficulty he severed his gaze from Emily and lied to Leah. Paul and Jared were uncannily silent. Being telepathically linked to one another, privacy is something non-existent, and they could hear their alpha's thoughts quite clearly and subtly feel the intense emotions raging through him. Like a sweet irony, Emily, who earlier was quite skeptical and downright sardonic of Sam, became both mute and dumbfounded as she saw the latter. She was immediately filled with an uncanny feeling of wonderment and complete admiration for him, as if love on first sight. Later that day, so does a person have to be dying to become like you? Bella curiously queried as she and Edward was walking just past the forest and into the rocky river banks. No, it's just Carlisle. He'll never do this to someone who has no other choice, Edward responded, albeit hesitant at first. So how long have you been like this? Bella looked up to him and inquired once more. Since 1918, Carlisle found me, dying with Spanish influenza, Edward replied. At that point heavy rain started to pour in cascading showers from the ominous dark clouds that abruptly formed above them. They then heard a thunderous roar from blackened skies and opted to seek shelter, away from the drenching rainfall. What was it like? Bella continued her curious inquiry. The venom was excruciating, but what Carlisle did was much harder. Not many of us has the restraint to do that, Edward replied in grim voice as he reminisced the painful process. But didn't he just have to bite? Bella was muddled and had a hard time choosing the right words for her follow-up question. When we taste human blood, a sort of frenzy begins. It's almost impossible to stop. Edward sighed in a voice that was filled with a strange cadence and fearful tremble. So is Carlyle the real reason why you don't kill people? Bella inquired carefully. No, it's not. I don't want to be a monster. Edward was silent for a while, then spoke in a reserved and low voice. My family, we think of ourselves as vegetarians. We only survive on the blood of animals, but it's like a human only living on tofu. It makes you strong but never really fully satisfied. He then looked to Bella with a reassuring smile, then explained his position in an analogy. Are there other vampires out there? Bella continued her long train of questions. Be careful around your new friend Bella. Edward sighed in a mirthless tone. He thought that Alex is a vampire and is the one responsible for Waylon's death, along with the chain of other recent murders. Who? Bella asked, perplexed. Edward didn't answer her question and became silent altogether. The expression on his face turned hard and foreboding. Bella chose not to venture any further and changed the topic. Can the rest of your family read minds like you can? No, it's just me and Naruto, he replied in a much calmer tone. He's interesting. The happiest vampire I've ever seen, Bella said, smiling. Naruto isn't a vampire, Edward chuckled. He's a different kind of immortal, he then told Bella with a trace of smile on his lip. I don't think I understand, Bella said with a confounded expression on her face. He's more like a demigod, part god, part human. He's the oldest among us, older than Carlyle himself and indisputably the most powerful. Even the Volturi flinch by the mere mention of his name. Edward then explained proudly. Okay, I didn't expect that, Bella breathily commented in astonishment. How old is he, and what's a Volturi? She then curiously inquired out of fascination. Guess, Edward replied, holding back a smile behind his lips. Okay, 300, Bella said, more of an inquiry than a deduction. No, Edward replied with a crooked smile. 500, Bella once again guesstimated. Still no, Edward shook his head, smiling. Okay, I give up, Bella sighed in submission. If what I heard from Carlyle is true, then Naruto is just a little over 10,000 years old. Edward told Bella that made the latter's eyes widen in both surprise and disbelief. 10,000, Bella gaspingly echoed, stunned. The subject of age bugs him though, so try not to mention it as much as possible when he's around. Edward quipped in a velvety voice that made Bella smile as well. Amidst the light-hearted merriment, their gaze locked gently upon each other like the merging of seasons into an unconquerable force. As Bella soulfully looked through Edward's honey-hued eyes, she could almost see her soul staring back, crooning the irrevocable love she had for him. Time itself seemed slowed down significantly as their faces inexorably get closer and closer to each other. Bella closed her eyes, keenly anticipating for their lips to meet and their souls to converge. Out of the blue, however, it started to hail. Pellets of frozen rain started to fall from the clouds that curiously formed with unnatural swiftness. As if things weren't disrupting enough, a particularly large hailstone, the size of a watermelon, plunged from the heavens and darted itself to the back of Edward's head, causing him to stumble and skid face first into the mud and moss-encrusted ground. Due to his vampire physiology, however, the blunt force from the hailstone's impact was far from lethal, but it hurt a lot. Eerily, as Edward was trying to get up from the ground, he could have sworn to have heard a puckish snigger emanating from the forest like the playful rustlings of a mischievous wind. Oh my God, are you all right? Bella worriedly exclaimed. Yeah, though I'm starting to feel that nature really hates me, Edward replied, dazed and was barely able to stand from the impact-induced stupor and bewilderment. Cullen's residence. Despite the untoward incident earlier, Edward went home with a big smile on his face. It was a strange sight for the other members of the coven, as they are used to his usually stoic and unenthusiastic demeanor. Then Naruto, knowing exactly the reason behind his bronze-haired brother's glee, mischievously decided to tease and prank him a little. Oh hey there, Edward, Naruto said with a fox-like smile on his face. Not this again, Edward nervously thought, having a rather bad omen that things will get really embarrassing, really soon. Hey, He then replied to Naruto with a low voice, expecting one of Naruto's witticisms that always finds him as the most vulnerable victim. Frankly, he hates it. So you and her, huh? Naruto said in a curious tone. Yes, Edward replied unenthusiastically in a near exasperated voice. Cool. Naruto smiled and then left. Edward was flummoxed from the unexpected behavior of Naruto, but was still quite suspicious that the blonde is just biding time and will strike while he least expects it. Few hours lapsed since their conversation, and the golden rays of the sun has subsided and was replaced by the gentle light of the peering moon and stars. Edward then felt a strange and familiar presence as he heard someone knocking at the door. As he opened the wooden portal of their house, he saw Bella standing on the other side. Bella, Edward saw in a perplexed voice. He was completely caught off guard, and the confused countenance on his face was priceless. What are you doing here? Naruto. He was about to inquire the reason of her visit, but then realized that the person in front of her was Naruto guised as Bella. Suddenly, Bella was engulfed with a puff of smoke, then reverted back to Naruto, who was laughing his heart out from amusement of the prank he just pulled. That look on your face, priceless. Naruto said, chortling, and was apparently about to lose breath from the barely controlled laughter. Yes, very funny. Are you done yet? Edward responded in a jaded tone and with a deadpan face, obviously exasperated. Oh come on. Don't be such killjoy, man. Give me 5 Casanova, Naruto jubilantly said with that sly fox smile of his, raising his right hand for a high five. Out of annoyance and perhaps some desire to get back on his golden-haired brother, Edward slammed the door hard on Naruto's face. Ouch! Naruto exclaimed on the Dexter side of the door, that made Edward silently smirk. Konoha. 10,000 years ago. The sky was blue as the Caspian Sea. For the first time in many years, Hinata Hyuga, who is now the 6th Hokage, can finally sleep well without the fears and nightmares of the past, for the war of the elemental nations has come to an end. The survivors of the plague have decided to unite and rebuild their destroyed lives and settlements, not as fractionalized individuals, clans or villages, but as a single people. Naruto-kun, I wish you were here. I wish you could see the fruition of our dreams. So much blood has been spilled, but at last, it's over now. We'll finally have peace. She nostalgically pondered, holding a red scarf that she knitted years ago while looking at the superbly towering statue of the shinobi from the Hyuga clan's estate. She remembered the pain all too well, like it was yesterday. Years ago, her father, Hiashi Hyuga, favored her younger sister Hanabi as the primary heir of the Hyuga clan over her. And worst still, he has also deemed Hinata a failure and a lost cause, unfit to bear the Hyuga name and a disgrace to the clan. She then reminisced the days when she slowly lost faith in herself and would spend her time alone, crying. This, however, changed one snowy day. While preparing to enroll into the academy, a group of bullies beleaguered and degraded her due to her Byakugan. Suddenly there was this young and rambunctious blonde boy who refused to stand idle by while the bullies insult her and unflinchingly came to her defense. However, since the bullies outnumber her defender, they trounced him badly and trampled over his scarf. One of the only few earthly possessions he had. This profound event has changed Hinata's life and made her not only able to feel an utmost admiration for Naruto, but also was able to relate to his pains and strong desire to be acknowledged and praised, since they were both considered outcasts by the people around them. She was also amazed that despite having nothing and no one to rely on, Naruto never gave up in believing he could become something great like the Hokage. Inspired by his determination, Hinata decided to try her best to become strong so she could be acknowledged as well, and adopted his conviction of never giving up. Her admiration for Naruto eventually grew into love, despite warnings from her elders to stay away from him. For years it has been her desire to give the red scarf that she painstakingly knit to Naruto, not only as a token of gratitude for defending her years ago, but also as the ultimate expression of her purest love for him. However, every time she attempted to do so, it ends up in usually awkward situations with the clueless blonde. Reminiscing all the awkward moment of her childhood made Hinata both smile gently, and tears fell from her eyes out of nostalgia and the pain of realizing that she will never see her friends again, for all of them perished during the Third Shinobi World War. Suddenly Hinata felt a looming presence. Activating her Byakugan, she then shifted to her gentle fist stance and prepared to combat the intruder. Turning around, she saw a rather good-looking young man with iridescent deep blue eyes leaning on the threshold of her room, coldly staring at her with an equally cold smile on his face. "After all this years you're still carrying a torch. How quaint," the young man said in mockery of her love for Naruto. "You know nothing," Hinata exclaimed in defense. "Obviously not." He smirked sardonically. "You gave him the gift of your love and got nothing in return. Bitter, isn't it?" He then continued to deride her. "Who are you?" Hinata demanded with a suspicious scowl. "Does it matter?" the young man replied, nonchalantly. "Lady Hokage," an Anbu exclaimed as he and his squad rushed to her aid. "You interrupted our discussion. How rude," the displeased young man said with a demonic voice. He then cupped his right hand, then gracefully raised it to the heavens that caused the sky to roar with thunder and flash upon flash, blaze with lightning. The Anbus were then violently launched into the air as countless reticulating bolts of lightning struck and incinerated them as they ascended. All that remained of the elite ninjas were flurrying hot clouds of ashes that were quickly scattered by the whistling gush of wind. "Behold the fate of all heroes." The young man then laughed maniacally, genuinely amused by the wanton murder he committed. However, in spite of his cold-blooded demeanor, the young man possessed a quality that is most confounding. Like an enigmatic force that no one could resist, working his enchantments upon any human with the fatal music of his voice. For a moment he made Hinata forget everything. She could only listen to him, and love him, and be his slaves, to do with him as he would. He made her drunk with the joy of being with him, and of looking into the heaven of his eyes, and of feeling the ecstasy that thrilled along her veins from the touch of his hand. Then the image of Naruto flashed before her eyes that made her claim back her almost lost volition and saw the horrific reality. Hinata was frozen in fear as she witnessed the squadrons of Anbu and countless other leaf shinobi effortlessly extinguished by the young man. She was stunned in horrific astonishment as she saw the young man's skin began to shimmer akin to his eerie glowing eyes while being gradually engulfed in a fiery blue-white aura that seemed to break down and shatter the very concept of reality before him. A great platinum halo etched with unknown gleaming runes, and eternally burning with iridescent flames of emerald and azure suddenly materialized and hovered above his head like a crown. While numerous flickering orbs of energy that looked like miniature stars continuously formed and oscillate ever so brightly and dazzling, revolving and orbiting around him in a graceful elliptical motion. Subsequently, long streams of light began to sprout from the young monk's back and grew into long appendages coated in the same fiery bluish-white energy. These streams of light flittered gracefully into the air, forming what she could best describe as angels' wings. Magnificent as they look, these streams hide a much more sinister purpose as its wielder used them individually as tendrils, binding the attacking ninjas in a tight hold and burning their flesh as if it's being coiled by great filaments heated to white incandescence, then slamming their charred corpses with immense force sufficient to create small craters upon impacting the earth. Hinata then found herself along with the mysterious stranger hovering high above Konoha. She beheld the village's buildings lessen and sink beneath her. It seemed that she and the young man flew skyward to a prodigious height, and she peered down across the rooftops of her own estate, upon the houses, the tilled fields and the forest beyond, and the blood-tinted sun brought low on its verge. And Hinata grew giddy, and the chill airs of the upper heavens blew upon her. She was soon dumbfounded with trepidation as she saw the village along with the distraught and panic-stricken people below her feet. "What are you?" Hinata gaspingly inquired, awe-stricken. "Believe me, you don't want to know how many answers that question have." The young man turned his gaze upon his horrified onlooker and replied in a tranquil but eerie echoing voice. He then held his hand and with an indolent flick of his wrist the entire landscape was suddenly filled with a dense unearthly fog and darkness fluttered in the air like a celestial shadow steadily quenching the sun's light. Out of the mists opened a great luminous chasm that seemed to ignore the laws of physics as it distorts and warped the fabric of space-time. From the portal emerged a titanic pillar of white flame of intolerable intensity, and within it are shadowy figures of the worst nightmares of humanity brought into existence and projected into reality by the baleful power of the outer god's Mentifery. Hinata watched in horror as she saw the villagers devoured, mutilated and massacred by the macabre monstrosities that the dark deity has unleashed upon them. She begged him to show compassion as she saw the gruesome fate that descended upon her people. She saw men, women, young and old shrieking in pain and horror, supplicating in anguish, and dying in the most horrific and unspeakable ways imaginable. Her pleas, however, were ignored and brushed off. Instead, the young man flashed an enigmatic boyish smile in reply. There is a storm now and an earthquake if you like. You must stand aside, out of danger. He then said, smirking in amusement at the sight of her shocked and horrified expression, as if the cruel carnage wasn't anything beyond mere entertainment to him. Out of the pitch-black firmaments, bolts of infernal flame shone red and fierce as they darted like burning projectiles, blasting everything they impacted into utter ruin, along with arcs of lightning that surreally cascaded continuously from the skies like bright pylons of pure destruction. Instantly, it seemed that great ebon clouds of thunder beetled against the sun. Lining the horizon, the clouds took the form of colossal monsters with heads and members somewhat resembling hydras. Rearing terribly, they trod down the sun like an extinguished ember. They then rose higher and vaster, coming towards Konoha. Deep, calamitous rumblings preceded them, and the earth shook visibly. Hinata saw that these were not immaterial clouds, but actual living forms that had come forth to tread the world in macrocosmic vastness. Throwing their shadows for many leagues before them, the vile entities charged unstoppable into the land of fire, and their feet descended like falling mountain crags upon far oases and towns of the outer landscape. Then immense fissures opened and both the living and the dead were swallowed by the unforgiving earth. "Why are you doing this?" Hinata tearfully queried in aghast. "I have heard their prayers of equality and peace and thus I have come to fulfill their heart's desire." The young man said in a voice that was strangely sincere, free from neither malice nor ill will. Hinata couldn't believe what she just heard nor how the enigmatic stranger says them with such innocence and blamelessness. "You murdered them," she then replied in a voice filled with rage and agony. "And granted their wish. Is there anything more peaceful than walking on a planet of 1,000,000,000 corpses? Is there not a more supernal equalizer than death?" The young man coldly replied, again without any trace malevolence in his voice. To this Hinata was taciturn. She then stood and beheld the ruining that was brought to her people. "Do not fret, for I have wrought well for the entirety of the human race, though it doesn't look like it on the surface. Your race never really knew good fortune from ill, always mistaking one for the other." The dark god said in a pleasant voice, "I can sense a nostalgic longing in you. Might that be love for him who you shall never see again?" He then inquired. His head was slightly tilting and there was a slightly perplexed countenance on his face. "You know nothing about love," Hinata exclaimed as she tried to attack with her 8th trigrams, air palm, but was blasted by an unfathomably condensed wave of invisible force that broke 3 of her ribs and caused a bone fragment to perforate one of her lungs. The outer god then turned to her with his glowing eyes that burned like dying azure stars at the hour of their culmination. "Very well, you shall see your beloved Naruto once again, 10,000 years from this day. Then we shall see the perdurability of your much vaunted love," he then said in an alluringly penetrating voice that was like the unparalleled elegance of the soft luminescence from long-dead stars that traveled into the vastness of the void and shone its radiance to a fledgling world. The outer god then outstretched his arm and from his palm casually unleashed a powerful wave of crimson energy that expanded in all directions and washed away everything on the planet's surface and the surrounding space around it, propagating throughout the stretch of the solar system. The potent energy wave nullified chakra itself and atomized every organism and construct that has been touched by chakra, reducing all their matter into its basic elemental components. Bereft of chakra that powers and sustains it since time immemorial, the elemental nations shattered and its fragments sunk violently like ingots of lead into the dark abyss of the harsh ocean. All that remained of its legacy were a handful of survivors that mysteriously found themselves in ships without any memory nor knowledge of the nature of their transport to the said vessels. The strange ships were built in an alien style, with elongated hulls and delicate woodwork. Without mast nor sails but sliced into the waters autonomously without any of them able to control its bearing. One of the ships sailed west while the other navigated east and landed into an archipelago known today as modern Japan. Hinata, who was aboard on one of these ships, saw the remnants of the elemental nations as it crumbled and sunk asunder into the watery depths along with the prodigious destruction of the moon which imploded then reformed surreally like a dream. Chapter 10. The White Wolf. Azure eyes opened and gazed upon the skies that were clear and blue as if a mirror image of the astral sea, along with the rustling and undulating grass fields which danced in graceful waves from the tender blowing soft breeze. Naruto then found himself laying blissfully on a soft meadow that was perfumed by the sweet-smelling wild blooms that riddled the scenery. He felt the flowing rays of the autumnal sun that bathed his skin with its gold and pleasant warmth, and could almost hear the saccharine melody of nature's mesmerizing song. Everything was profoundly resplendent and supernal, and his senses were gradually set adrift into a state of heavenly splendor and soul-pacifying equanimity. Surreally, the sun abruptly subsided, and like a clockwork celestial calendar in a planetarium, the sky dimmed and the bright sunlight was interchanged by the opalesque luminescence of the ashen moon and iridescent glints of the innumerable stars that boldly declared themselves into the heavens. Suddenly out of the adjacent forest he saw a magnificent white wolf appear from its depths, then gracefully glided towards him, slowly threading its paws into the firefly-lit trail that shimmered mesmerizingly like glittering crystals of sunlight-touched snow. He then stretched his hand and felt the soft fur of the magnificent creature, who tilted its face into his palm as if in reciprocation of the affectionate gesture. The wolf's eyes then widened, and with a gush of wind it immediately shed its skin and transformed into a pulchritudinous woman of unparalleled grace and elegance, and she's naked. Naruto was astounded as the beautiful dame raised her face and he saw someone familiar. It was Hinata Hyuga, staring soulfully at him with her distinctive white eyes and a gentle smile. Hinata, Naruto stutteringly muttered as he beheld the Hyuga, whose swaying long beautiful ebon hair served as the only cover to her voluptuous body. Naruto then took of his jacket and used it to cover Hinata's bare physique, then hugged her ardently. Naruto-kun, Hinata replied in a voice that was sweet as the nectar of the mythical lotus tree. Her eyes became lively and her face was filled with imponderable amounts of joy. "Dude, wake up," she then said in a gruff and manly voice. "Say what now?" Naruto queried in a shocked voice and with a dumbfounded and confused countenance in his face. "I said make love to me, my handsome shinobi," Hinata said passionately with a gentle smile on her face as she closed her eyes and puckered her lips. Without a second thought, Naruto took Hinata in his arms and kissed her torridly with the burning white intensity of 1,000 suns. As their lips locked, Naruto smoothly slid his tongue into her mouth and started exploring it and massaging her tongue with his. It was the epiphany of nirvana, Naruto thought. What the foo? Naruto heard once again the same gruff and manly voice, but he decided to ignore it until the said voice became muddled and muffled as if the person of which it belongs to was struggling in vehement protest. He then slickly moved his hand towards her ample bosom, but strangely they fell hard to the touch, like the pectoral muscle of a bodybuilder. The shinobi then heard Rosalie screaming in aghast. Subsequently, Hinata along with the surreal landscape fogged up and disintegrated like a dream. It then turned out that all of it is indeed just a dream, conjured by his forlorn heart that yearned to see Hinata once more. As his senses and volition returned to the waking world, however, an extremely awkward if not downright embarrassing scenario greeted him. Naruto found himself Frenching Emmett, who was struggling to escape his tight clutch. The latter originally went to his room to wake him up, but thinking it was Hinata from his dreams, Naruto unwittingly hugged him in an inescapable embrace and unconsciously proceeded to an open-mouthed tongue kiss, much to the horror of Emmett, who tearily and desperately struggled to escape the blonde's adamantine grasp, but to no avail since Naruto is much stronger than he is. As Naruto fully realized the uncomfortable scenario, he quickly and comically jumped away from Emmett and vice versa. Then both boys screamed in horror as they frantically wiped their tongues with their bare hands in a sad yet comedic manner. As if things weren't bad enough, he then turned to the door and saw the rest of the Cullens with a stunned and dumbfounded expression on their faces. Their jaws were completely slacked and their eyes widened like dinner plates out of shock and disbelief, with Rosalie being the worst affected of them all. The poor girl would have fainted from the traumatic experience if it isn't biologically impossible for a vampire to do so. "Naruto, what the hell?" Rosalie furiously exclaimed in protest as the haze from her mind dissipated. "What? I'm sorry, all right. You know damn well I didn't. I never wanted for that to happen," Naruto frantically exclaimed back in his defense. "Why'd I feel so molested?" Emmett muttered in a deadpan voice. "Yeah, well, that makes the both of us," Naruto then continued. "Tell that to your boner," Emmett said, pointing at Naruto's bulge. He knew that it was indeed an accident, but decided to squeeze some fun out of the awkward situation anyway to get even to his blonde sibling's constant wisecracking pranks. "That's not for you, Yano," Naruto hysterically yelled. "Now I feel molested and then rejected," Emmett said glumly, followed by a false sigh. At the back of his head, however, he was laughing out loud from Naruto, who've just gone completely hysterical and quite nearly paranoid from the profound embarrassment. He then felt a bit of fear himself as he looked over his shoulder and saw Rosalie's penetrating angry glare directed towards both Naruto and him. Forks High School. Well, I suppose I'm still lucky that this day proceeded surprisingly well despite that fiasco earlier. Naruto thought as he was answering a trigonometry problem on the board while the rest of the girls in the room were blushing red for they were so enamored by his good looks. Then the bell rang and it was lunch. The same girls hovered around Naruto like flies as he walked towards the school cafeteria. He saw his siblings on their usual table along with Bella who sat with Edward. "Hey guys, what's up?" Naruto greeted them jovially and exuberantly. He would have teased Edward but given the situation that occurred earlier he opted not to. As he turned his gaze into the old table where Bella used to sit he saw Mike and Alex conversing about an unpleasant subject that probably involves Edward and his relationship with Bella. Looks like Tweedleperv and Tweedledurk has something in mind. I wonder what pathetic nonsense they're up to now. He then thought as he looked incredulously at the pair of boys with a deadpan expression on his face. Based from his observation, Naruto concluded that Mike Newton is one of those jealous pervert type and for some twisted reason he could relate to him in a degree, being once a pervert himself and competed for the affection of a girl against a guy that everyone think was much cooler. Then there is Alex Storm which he and the rest of the Cullens were suspicious about. He never really forgotten nor forgave the young man's remark towards him being a solid believer, though there was more to it than that. Unlike his other siblings, Naruto didn't think that Alex was a vampire. He however never really liked him for some reason he couldn't comprehend. The shinobi also speculates that the naive and merry demeanor of the latter is just a facade that veiled his more calculating and dangerous nature. Naruto then surreptitiously observed the two and read their lips as they conversed with each other. "You know what's the first thing I did when I found out that Bella is dating that freak Cullen?" Mike said indignantly in a gruff voice. "You charged weary and alone back to your room, then touched yourself all day in false hopes that everything will change for the better as you relieved yourself while you glumly fondled with that picture of Bella you stole. That doesn't even do her justice," Alex said in a dry tone and nearly monotonous voice. "What? No, you creep." Mike vehemently denied his friend's assessment but at the back of his head he was anxious and edgy for it was accurate down to the last detail. "If you say so, friend," Alex then replied tranquilly in the same perfunctory and desultory tone, and disinterested voice without looking back to Mike for his somewhat stoic and low-spirited stare was fixed on Bella and Edward. What even makes you come up with that kind of sick assumption?" Mike curiously queried Alex with regards to his earlier statement, retaining the outraged rouse in his voice. "Just a hunch," Alex then said with a cheeky smile on his face as he turned his attention to Mike. Okay, that was actually funny, Naruto thought, sniggering. Though on the other hand, those two losers are so pathetic that even I can't help but feel a bit sorry for them. He then muttered inaudibly as he slowly shook his head. "Scanning for cute boys," Rosalie scoffed and at the same time teased Naruto. "Oh come on Rosalie, we already talked about this yaw." "No," Naruto exasperatedly exclaimed that made everyone on the table snigger in amusement, especially Alice and Jasper. "Those two are actually really nice once you get to know them. If you want I can hook you up with either one of them," Bella quipped, trying to suppress a smirk but wasn't able to hold it for long. "Aw not you too Bella," Naruto sighed then gloomily sulked in a corner. "He'll get along with Newton just fine since both of them are closet perverts. Come to think of it, same goes with that weirdo Storm. You affectionately referred to him as pretty boy and stud muffin more than once." "Right," Edward bantered with a smile playing at the edge of his lip. "Look who's talking, at least I don't break into other people's house and watch them while they sleep." "How twisted is that for your discriminating taste?" Naruto retorted, crossing his arms and childishly muttered in a voice that was too faint for Bella to hear but was perfectly audible to the rest of the Cullens which made them snicker. Later that day, at the luxuriant and lichen-wreathed forests that surrounded the edge of Forks, in a dell where the golden rays of the autumnal sun penetrated the looming canopies of towering trees there stood a magnificent large white wolf. It was panting, catching its breath for not too long ago it just eluded its pursuers who were urgently trying to project their thoughts into its mind, endeavoring to calm it down. Suddenly, the wolf heard the thoughts of its pursuers as they tried to locate it and so the beast ran, sprinting in speeds that would have left a sports car dead in the dust, only stopping when it was absolutely certain that the others are too far behind to catch up. As this fateful chase took place, Naruto was deep in the forest doing his best to unwind from the dreary day, lying blissfully at the soft grass of a viridian glade where the sweet-smelling flowers of autumn sporadically bloom in lush abundance. Suddenly the shinobi felt a strange and oddly familiar presence as he took notice the rustling of bushes. Then from the myrtle-shaded shrub sprang a white wolf similar to the one he saw in his dream the night before. For a moment Naruto was stunned by its majesty, for it was an amazing creature to behold, with fur akin to that of freshly fallen snow and regal magnificence possessed only by nature's noblest of creations. A Quileute shape-shifter, huh? I haven't seen one of them for quite some time now. Naruto deducted the nature of the creature as it cautiously walked amidst the coniferous yews and red cedar trees, heading towards his direction, sniffing his scent and discerning if he is either friend or foe. Naruto then extended his hand to show that he meant it no harm, but the wolf misinterpreted the gesture and fell back to a defensive stance, growling fiercely at him. "Okay, easy. I'm not going to hurt you," Naruto said gently in reassurance, but it hasn't quelled the beast's rage, so he decided to cast a genjutsu to calm it down. "Nihon Shoujo no Jutsu," Naruto exclaimed as he folded his hands into a tiger seal. Suddenly the wolf beheld a shower of white illusory feathers. Its eyes began to get heavy and drowsy as the soft falling plumes fluttered and began to pile up. The Quileute shape-shifter tried to resist the hypnotic spell, but to no avail. The desire to sleep was instinctive and there was no fighting it. Eventually, it succumbed to the Eden-like bliss of the jutsu and inexorably fell into a tranquil slumber. Naruto was then dumbfounded as the wolf started to collapse and revert into its human form, transforming back into a beautiful woman, and not just any woman, it was someone he knew. "Leah," Naruto gaspingly muttered as he quickly caught her in his arms and gazed upon her face. The shinobi then felt something he can't explain deep within every fiber of his being, like a bright and warm flame that has been reignited after centuries of long musty inertness. An element of vague but compelling disquietude has now mingled with his curiosity as he held in his arms the naked Quileute dame, of whom he felt a special significance, a concern that was incomprehensibly personal and intimate. Then in a moment of reeling and whirling confusion, it seemed to him that sometime or somewhere he knew and loved her, though it was beyond the capacity of his cognizance to remember when or where. Then through his six paths sage power Naruto opted to peer inside of Leah's mind. He knew well that aside from being in proximity with a vampire, extreme emotional distress was also an efficacious catalyst to initiate a shapeshifter's transformation into his wolf form. Naruto felt a bit of shame for desecrating the privacy of someone else's mind, but as a shinobi of the hidden leaf he was tempered to extract intel any way necessary. Also he was thrilled with a strange excitement from a feeling of some momentous revelation he couldn't fully comprehend. Surreally, a peculiar hallucination seized Naruto as he examined the memories of Leah. He beheld how the latter's lingering suspicion from her sudden breakup with Sam culminated into an extremely painful realization as one day she saw her trusted cousin in the arms of the man she loved, and still loved. She felt betrayed, unloved and inadequate. This pain focused itself inwardly into a maelstrom of unbearable emotional torment and projected itself outwardly, changing her physical form. Suddenly, Leah's body started shaking as if afflicted by a violent convulsion. Her bones painfully broke, then grew afresh, refitting itself over a new animalistic frame as she changed into her wolf form. Her mind then ran amok from the sensory overload as her newly enhanced senses took her by surprise. A terrible perturbation possessed her. Her very sense of identity and humanity was troubled. She was adrift in a sea of stormy confusion, of disoriented thoughts and amplified painful memories. The feral rage grew as if a feeble flame that fed itself in secret from all the torment and pain was now a great conflagration that consumes everything in its path. Then it would seem that all the agony, confusion and anger found a focal point as her piercing glare caught the image of Emily. With mindless rage she attacked her cousin implacably, clawing her face with feral wrath, nearly killing her too if it weren't for Sam, who instantly phased into his wolf form and grappled her while simultaneously using his alpha voice to calm her down. The cloud of rage in Leah's mind abruptly subsided like an ebbing tide, and she beheld her horrified cousin with half of her face badly wounded from the clawing she received. Leah was then filled with confounding lamentation and remorse. Shocked from what she had done, she decided to run away, running as fast as she could out of shame and regret. Carver Cafe. Mike and Alex usually hang out at Carver Cafe every Wednesday after school, for they know that Bella and Charlie eat out their dinner on that restaurant, on that particular day, every week. The two boys waited patiently, but Bella nor Charlie didn't come that day, and it frustrated them. Their woe was further exacerbated when they found out from Angela that Edward took Bella to meet his family. Evidently the anguish quickly converted itself into a jealousy-fueled wrath that especially afflicted Mike, making him wish all sorts of misfortune towards Edward and the rest of the Cullens. "Arg, I hope Cullen fall of a cliff or something," Mike annoyingly exclaimed in rebuke of the romance between Bella and Edward. "So you want him disposed now?" Alex queried with a somewhat evil look in his eyes. "If only that's possible," Mike sighed, crossing his arms and looking away. "You know, there is a way," Alex said in shady voice while grinning cunningly like a demon. "What do you mean?" Mike asked with a perplexed expression on his face. "My family has made its modern-day fortune through the development and sale of advanced military technologies since the Middle Ages, and being the primary heir, I have access to the most cutting-edge of such technologies," he said in an astute voice akin to that of a seasoned businessman as he took off his necklace, from which hanged a small kite-shaped pendant etched with the coat of arms of House de Sanguinis, at the back of which was a biometric scanner where the young man placed his right thumb, activating a hidden mechanism that caused the dexter and sinister sides of the pendant to split, revealing itself to be a high-tech-looking device of some sort with a red disc-like button in the middle. "What's that?" Mike again inquired in both wonderment and a bit of trepidation. "Well, you see, the dinner the Cullens had last week was laced with a complement of a powerful nanotech explosive one of our scientists developed a few years back. The devices should have settled well in their intestinal tracts by now, and upon detonation would turn Edward and his family inside out. This transmitter is the interface to initiate the said process with but a push of a button," Alex explained in the same shrewd manner while the crooked grin on his face noticeably widened. "So what will it be, my friend?" he then continued, but was cut off when Mike suddenly grabbed the transmitter from his hand and unflinchingly pressed the button without any hesitation. To Mike's surprise, however, the device released a small yet powerful electrical shock that made him jump from his seat like a startled cat. "What the heck, dude? That hurt like hell," he then hissed, lividly. "Well, serve you right. You're my friend and I will help you as much as I could, but I will never help you in such a way. For even contemplating of such an underhanded approach to secure your objective is appalling and unacceptable. A man of honor should always consider scrupulousness and decency above all else and endeavor to do the right and proper, even if disadvantaged, even if the odds are stacked up against you. For even if subdued by a superior force, you could still stand tall and proudly say that you did your best, and although you may have lost today, you will gloriously rise from the ashes tomorrow and continue to fight, for your integrity and fortitude still remained uncorroded and uncompromised," Alex said in a sagacious voice as he sipped some soda. "You must always fight fair, you know," he then continued. "Dude, I couldn't even begin to say how outlandish that was." "Who are you, Spartacus?" Mike smirked as he brushed off his friend's advice. "I do realize that the statement was slightly out of touch with the contemporary milieu, but you know as well as I do that it is the indisputable truth," Alex replied calmly, though there is just enough tremble in his voice to hint that he's starting to get irritated. "Slightly," Mike said with a creased brow, then chuckled. "Well, I like the nano-bomb idea better, if such a thing is even real. I think he just pulled it off from that cheap sci-fi show he loves watching," he then thought while looking incredulously at Alex. "You're probably wondering if such a device does really exist or I just made it all up." "Yes, they are real," Alex said coldly in a blasé voice. "Oh great, now he's inside my head again. What is he, telepathic or something?" Mike thought in annoyance. "So why don't we put some of it on a certain someone's drink?" "Huh, will you help me out here, Alex?" he then playfully urged with a maniacal yet comedic grin on his face. "Well, that's an interesting notion in itself, but still no. Why not?" "You mean aside from the obvious fact that it's not a very nice thing to do?" Alex replied in a pleasant voice as he tried to reason with his friend. "Plus, I'm not gonna throw away $10 million for such a childish endeavor," he then muttered surreptitiously to himself. "You greedy hypocrite, I know you want him gone too, you're just too cheap and don't want to spend a bit more on the process," Mike said frankly, pointing a finger of suspicion that made Alex froze in embarrassment and felt as if 1,000 arrows had struck him in the rear end. "Hey, don't judge me," Alex exasperatedly exclaimed in a comedic chibi-like outburst. "Yeah, it's kinda hard not to." Mike shrugged with a nonchalant voice and with a deadpan expression on his face. Amidst their discussion, Mike noticed Alex looking at the transparent glass wall of the diner, into the deep forest with a faraway blank stare as if something has abruptly distracted him. This, along with the latter's immediate demeanor which was unsettlingly stern and taciturn, has prompted his concern. As Mike perused more closely, he noticed Alex's left hand that was currently holding a fork. His forefinger, however, was moving in wavering and flickering motions as if drawing some enigmatic symbol into the air, of which by reasons yet obscured has suddenly become frigid as polar ice and electrifying as if in close proximity to a colossal Van de Graaff generator. "Dude, is there something wrong?" Mike then inquired. "Nothing. A few minor complications, but on the whole everything's fine, just fine," Alex replied with a fox-like smile emanating from his face and a cunning, sardonic gleam in his iridescent sapphire blue eyes, like that of a prankster who just victoriously pulled a mischievous prank. He then clenched his fist and abruptly raised it like a boxer doing an uppercut and chuckled in a somewhat sadistic tone. "That would teach him to keep his hands for himself." He then murmured inaudibly, "You're really weird. You know that," Mike said while eyeing Alex suspiciously, thinking that the latter has just came up with some grand scheme to take Bella for himself. "Yeah. That's why we're friends. It's our common denominator," Alex said in a monotonous voice with a deadpan expression on his face as he looked incredulously back to Mike. "That and our mutual dislike for a certain ginger named Edward Cullen," Mike said as he raised his cup and made toast with Alex, who concurred with every word he said. Quote, "Cullen's residence. This is incredible. It's so light and open, you know," Bella commented as she ingresses the Cullens' abode. She was expecting at a dark Transylvanian-styled castle like those in the movies, or at least some Gothic ambiance, but instead saw a fairly modern house with postmodern interior design, complete with transparent glass walls from which south side was a picturesque view of the Kalawa River. "What did you expect? Coffins and dungeons and moats?" Edward replied, smiling. "No, not the moats," Bella said, chuckling. "Not the moats," Edward echoed, chuckling as well. "This is the one place we don't have to hide," he then continued as they climb up the stairs to the kitchen, where Bella could hear opera music playing along with some sort of cooking show on TV. In the kitchen, which was located on the second floor of the house, Carlisle, Esme and Emmett decided to go the extra mile and prepare something for Bella, while Rosalie was standing near the counter, somewhat irritated. "Is she even Italian?" Rosalie inquired with an air of annoyance in her voice. "Her name is Bella," Emmett replied while chopping some radish for the salad. "I'm sure she'll love it, no matter what," Carlisle supplemented. "Get a whiff of that," Rosalie exasperatedly sighed. "Here comes the human," she then continued with a sarcastic and sing-song tone while everyone aside from her was excited to see their guest. A few moments thereafter Edward and Bella walked inside the kitchen, where Esme warmly greeted them. "Bella, we're making Italiano for you," she then said eagerly. "Bella, this is Esme. My mother for all intents and purposes." Edward introduced Esme to Bella while behind her were three persons. There was Emmett, who looked very friendly and waved amicably at them with a knife in his hand, Rosalie, who looked at her coldly, and Carlisle, who was her attending physician during that truck incident a couple of months ago. "Buongiorno," Bella nervously greeted them. Technically she said good morning in Italian, though it was already late in the afternoon by that time. Also, she can't help but wonder where Alice, Jasper and Naruto were. "Molte bene," Esme replied, smiling kindly. Well, that answered Rosalie's earlier question. She's not Italian, she then thought. "You've given us an excuse to use the kitchen for the first time," Carlisle said, smiling gently. "Usually Naruto is the only one who uses this part of the house." He then chuckled. "Yeah, what's up with him anyway? It's ramen this, ramen that. It's so annoying he doesn't even need to eat," Rosalie scoffed. A confounded expression emanated on Bella's face after hearing it, as she has no idea what Rosalie's was talking about, nor could she relate on the subject. "He absorbs energy from nature, so he doesn't really need to eat anything. He just does it for reasons known only to him," Edward whispered to Bella as Rosalie continued to whine. Now Rosalie, You know it upsets Naruto whenever someone talks ill of ramen. Speaking of him, does anyone knows where he is? Carlyle reproached her gently but realized that indeed he hasn't seen Naruto since the blonde left for school earlier. Who cares where that idiot is? Rosalie sneered as she reminisced the untoward incident earlier. Even slightly recollecting the minutest of its detail flared her temper. She then glared at Emmett, who in turn just awkwardly looked away in hopes that she'd be much calmer when he looked back. I hope you're hungry, Esme then said to Bella in a hopeful voice, hardly an effort to change the subject. Yeah, absolutely. Bella lied as she didn't want their hard work to go to waste. She already ate. Edward saw Eid out of honesty but came out a bit callous, and it earned him a glare from Bella. Suddenly they heard the sound of breaking glass reverberate throughout the kitchen, and as they perused its source they beheld in pieces the salad bowl Rosalie was holding earlier. Apparently she vented her earlier frustration and dislike of Bella on the unfortunate bowl and its contents. She then stepped over the shards of broken glass and looked at Bella and Edward fiercely. Perfect, Rosalie said sarcastically while Emmett went over to her and tried to calm her down. Yeah, it's just because I know that you guys don't eat. Bella stuttered as she tried to explain herself and defuse the situation before it gets even more volatile. Of course, Esme interrupted to prevent Bella from feeling more awkward than she already does. It's very considerate of you. She then turned to Rosalie and gave her a look of disapproval. Just ignore Rosalie. I do. Edward saw Eid. Yeah, let's just keep pretending like this isn't dangerous for all of us. Rosalie retorted with a voice of ever-increasing intensity as she failed to control her anger. I would never tell anybody anything. Bella reassured them as earnestly as she could. She knows that, Carlyle said level-headedly, easing her nerves. Yeah, well, the problem is, you two have gone public now, so. Emmett said, trying to explain Rosalie's vexation although he was hesitant to even finish his sentence as Esme silently called his name in reprimand. No. She should know. The entire family will be implicated if this ends badly. Rosalie continued what Emmett has restrained himself to further utter. Badly, as in, I would become the meal. Bella said, gawking. She again began to feel a bit of fear and concern. The statement however made the Cullens snicker, and even Rosalie seemed to be suppressing a laugh. Hi Bella, a cheerful and sweet voice then said that made Bella turn to the balcony and saw Alice along with Jasper. I'm Alice. She then introduced herself as she walked over and hugged Bella. Oh, you do smell good, she commented that made Edward's eyebrows furrow. Alice, what are you? Edward inquired with an awkward expression in his face along with a creased brow but was cut off. It's okay. Bella and I are gonna be great friends. Alice then assured him as she already saw it on her visions. Sorry, Jasper's our newest vegetarian. It's a little difficult for him. Carlyle said. Pleasure to meet you, Jasper said politely, inordinately restraining himself to give in to his vampiric instincts. It's okay, Jasper, Alice said, smiling, you won't hurt her. She then tried to assure everyone but it came out quite different, and once again the awkward expression on Edward's face was priceless. All right, I'm gonna take you on a tour of the rest of the house. Edward then told Bella and walked away with her but turned one last time to his family and rolled his eyes at them. Though he was thankful that Naruto wasn't there lest it would be far much awkward, not to mention embarrassing, as he was absolutely certain that the blonde won't be able to resist teasing him. Quote. Finally, away from the presence of the prying coven members, Bella and Edward then felt their passion reignite. Under the music of Clair de Lune their eyes once again locked and their souls about to converge. Bella, Edward saw Eid ardently in a velvety voice as he held Bella's hands gently and kissed it. It made Bella blush slightly, it mesmerized her, and she was captivated and enthralled into dreamlike equanimity, drawing her ever so closer to his lips like a powerful current to a helpless ship. Verily, it would seem that everything is perfect and that day was made for the tryst of lovers. Out of sudden, a small stone the size of a golf ball seemingly shot itself out nowhere and hit Edward in the temple with such force that it nearly knocked him out. Wrath quickly became the predominant emotion as he recovered from the daze. Who's there? Edward lividly demanded to know the identity of the one who pelted him maliciously. At first he thought that Naruto was responsible but realized that though the blonde can be annoying at times he would never do such a thing. With his vampiric speed he then quickly moved a considerable distance from his room and into the river banks that was abundant with clustering boulders, as he deducted that such a place would be the likely origins of the projectile that callously struck him. The azure sky then suddenly turned dun and ominous, in the midst of which, the sun was clearly visible, and it was burning like a great crimson ember. Then something even stranger occurred. The rocks and boulders on the riverbanks levitated and was hurled to Edward, which he was able to avoid flawlessly. "Is that all you got?" Edward exclaimed, as if challenging the invisible entities that were flinging these boulders at him. Then, as if response, the piano resting on the living room at the second floor of the Cullens' house was dragooned towards Edward with incredible speeds that he wasn't able to avoid it, crashing upon impact with a loud crunch as the vampire was sandwiched amidst it in a large rock. Owing to the sturdiness of a vampire's physiology, the injuries Edward sustained wasn't fatal, but it was indeed extremely agonizing that everyone saw how the former came out of the creaking wreck with an unmistakable expression of pain in his face. "Edward, what happened?" Esme maternally inquired with a mix of both perturbation and cautiousness in her voice. "I don't know, Somio," Edward stutteringly muttered in a barely audible mumble, but was cut off when suddenly an awfully potent invisible kinetic punch slammed itself into his nether regions like a sledgehammer with a force akin to that of an angry elephant's kick, nearly crushing the family jewels in its wake. "Edward, what happened? Are you okay?" Bella gaspingly and frantically inquired as she ran towards him as fast as she could. Edward, however, couldn't utter any word in reply, only a droning groan as he held his crotch from the unfathomably immense pain that made Emmett and Jasper cringe. Meanwhile, back in the forest, a few hours has passed. Leah finally awakens from her blissful sleep and beheld the saffron rays of the thickening twilight. Then as she looked around she noticed some folded clothes besides her to wear and the varsity leather jacket that covered her body from the elements. "Naruto," she muttered, smiling gently as she caught his scent on the jacket with her newly amplified olfactory sense and remembered that he was the last thing she saw before strangely falling into an Elysian torpor. Leaning at the back of a large oak tree was Naruto. For a reason he couldn't really understand, he decided to conceal himself behind the great tree as he noticed that Leah was about to wake up. He was never really shy when it comes to girls, but it was somewhat a different case this time. He was sweating, his heart was pounding and beating irrepressibly, and butterflies fluttered inside his stomach. He then put on his monster headphones and decided to play some tunes to ease his nerves, but whether it is by anxiety-induced clumsiness or by fate's clever design, his phone fell from his hand and the headphone connector pulled out from its socket, causing the former device to play the song in its full volume for Leah to hear. "Here we go. Come with me. There's a world out there that we should see. Take my hand, close your eyes. With you right here, I'm a rocketeer. Let's fly, 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 fly. Up here we go, go." The song was Rocketeer by Far East Movement, and as it played both of their hearts connected as if they were beating in sync with each other, and Naruto felt a love for Leah that was the same he felt thousands of years ago for Hinata. "Thank you, Naruto," Leah said as she closed her eyes and tears raced to her face out of happiness, for at that very moment, and though unintentional, Naruto made her forget the agony that burdened her so much and at the same time made her realize her self-worth. "Go get her, kid," Kurama said in encouragement. The fox was grinning, genuinely happy for his Jinchuriki. The gentle rays of the setting sun shined on to the maiden, who was once again filled with hope as she sat on the autumn-perfumed grass while the noble yet unseen hero watched vigilantly like a silent sentinel behind the shadows until the right time has come for him to reveal himself and profess his love. It was indeed a splendorous and heartwarming scene, and if ever a painter would skillfully render the image on canvas, it would be a masterpiece. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.